This might be something you've been wondering, but you're afraid to ask a recruiter or a consultant because, well, it might make you seem lazy. Or worse, it might actually hurt your chances of getting an offer at all. But in order to make a good decision for your future career, you need to have an accurate picture of what the career is like. My name is Davis, and I'm a former Bain consultant as well as the founder of My Consulting Offer. At My Consulting Offer, we're a team of former McKinsey, Bain, and BCG recruiters, interviewers, and consultants. To date, we've helped over 600 people just like you land their dream consulting offer and start careers in management consulting. In this video, I'm going to share with you what it's like to work at a consulting firm like McKinsey, Bain, and BCG so you can actually know the lifestyle and if you can actually achieve work-life balance at all. And at the end of the video, I'm also going to share with you what firms like McKinsey, Bain, and BCG are doing in order to help their consultants with work-life balance. These are some of the creative solutions they've come up with, and I want to share them with you at the end of this video. And if you want more videos like these covering what it's like to work at a consulting firm, feel free to tap the like button and that'll tell me to create more. Project work is demanding, and consultants often find themselves working overtime. That is, working 50, 60, and even 70+ hour work weeks. But the hours and intensity varies from one project to another. Client projects with tight deadlines, for example, projects that only last 2 to 4 weeks, typically have tighter deadlines and more intense periods of work than projects that are, for example, over a 6-month period. Type of project also impacts the working hours. For example, due diligence projects, where the client has 3 weeks to decide if they should acquire this company or not, are going to be a lot more intense. Whereas a 6-month project to help a client map out their 5-year vision is going to be a lot more laid back. Travel also impacts working hours. Bain, for example, has a local staffing model where consultants are mostly staffed on projects with local clients. Whereas McKinsey has a global staffing model where consultants can be staffed from anywhere and might find themselves racking up a lot more frequent flyer miles than they'd like. As a result, you might be spending additional hours on taxis to the airport, airplane rides, and traveling from the airport to the client site. It can be challenging for a consultant to maintain control over their schedule. Many teams will try to implement norms such as, for example, each team member gets 1 day where they get to go home early, or the team collectively decides to stop working and to go home after a certain hour. But this also depends on the project. For example, if there's an important client meeting coming up, then all these norms might just go out the window. The big 3 firms, McKinsey, Bain, and BCG, also known as the MBB firms, recognize the importance of implementing work-life balance practices to improve staff satisfaction and also to retain their talent. But by the end of the day, project-based work, especially in consulting, are going to have peaks and valleys. There might be peaks where you're preparing for an important update or the client has a decision to make. And then there are valleys where you're sitting there waiting for the information to come from the client, or you're waiting for someone to unblock you from the client side. Over the long haul, the longer you stay in consulting, the more of these projects you'll experience. You'll experience both the intense projects and the more relaxed ones. So what can you expect from a typical day in consulting? An MBB consultant's day usually ranges from 8 hours to 12 hours on average. On some rare occasions, this might spike up to 16 or even 20 hours, but this is not the norm or what you can expect long term. For example, some people would prefer starting early in the day versus having evening work, while others might prefer to start their days later with the trade-off that they'll do some evening work. Teams will also set boundaries for working time. Even if the aspirational goals aren't always met, the manager knows what to solve for. Most of the time though, you can expect to have some evenings to yourself. Your team members will expect you to have a life outside of consulting, whether it's working out, having dinner with friends, or spending time with your family, or taking care of your kids. As a result, all consulting teams will try to make the work as reasonable as possible so that the team can actually get offline and actually have a life outside of work. While you might be on call in case something comes up, you are expected to be able to have a life outside of consulting. And by the way, if you're interested in becoming a management consultant, check out the link below where you can book a free 30-minute strategy session with my team. MBB consultants typically work around 50 to 60 hours, and the work is usually concentrated mainly between Mondays and Thursdays, with Fridays being a more relaxed day. There'll be periods where it's going to be 60+ hours of work, but this isn't the norm. And if it does happen, it's really for a period of time where the project is intense, with the expectation that after the milestone is hit, that the hours would come down. During my time at Bain, I had projects that were about 40 to 45 hours a week, while other projects were shorter projects that had more intense deadlines, and I would work 60+ hours. But again, this was only for a few weeks at a time and not for months at a time. Weekly hours are also impacted with if you have to travel to the client site. For example, for consultants who travel Monday through Thursday, they might have a lighter Friday. Traditionally, consulting firms have office Fridays to build office culture. Typically for the cases where I traveled, the hours were longer because I had to think about the hours it took to get from my home to the airport, from the airport flying to the client site, and do the whole thing all over again when I'm returning back to base. So those hours get added to the weekly hours as well. It's also important to note that even if the client is outside the city, for example, unless there's an important meeting, you might not need to be at the client site at all. Or if you have a major personal commitment or there's a professional commitment like a global training, you might be excused from going to the client's site. All of this is worked out with the client as well as with your team with enough lead time. Weekend work at the MBBs is typically the exception and not the norm. When I was working in consulting, I found it helpful to log in on Sundays to clear my inbox, take care of expenses, and just to plan out for the week, for example, if I had to travel. Again, this is more the exception and not the norm. And if I did have weekend work, it was mainly because we had an important meeting that following Monday, and usually this was on projects that were on shorter time frames. Otherwise, we would have gotten everything done Friday before logging off. While the long hours or travel schedule might seem daunting, it's only through certain phases for certain projects. Over the long view of your consulting career, you're not going to be at 100% utilization. That is, you're not going to be staffed on a paid project 100% of the time. This happened to me during my first months at Bain when I was in between projects. Instead of coming in for even any client development work or any internal work, I was just asked to stay home and away from the office. So in between certain projects, I would have a few days before my next one. And one time I even had 2 weeks before my next one. And still I had colleagues who had a month in between their projects. When unstaffed, that is not doing any project work, a consultant is said to be on the beach. Whoops, nope, not that one. During beach time, consultants typically work on internal projects such as writing proposals, which are less intense. Or if the firm has nothing to do with you, you just stay home. Consultants also attend formal trainings for 1 to 2 weeks every single year. This is a time when consultants are focusing on professional development and networking with others within the firm. Finally, MBB firms really want to protect your vacation time.
It's time to enjoy our vacation.
Yeah. Canceling someone's vacation or asking them to work during vacation is seen as a last resort. And when this happens, typically the firm will compensate by giving you more vacation days later. So it's very rare that when you take a vacation that you're going to be expected to log on or get a call from the team. And the longer you stay in consulting, especially at an MBB firm, the more control you're going to have over your schedule, the type of projects you work on, and if you decide to remain client-facing or not. Of course, keeping in mind that projects are more demanding if you decide to be client-facing. If you do stay long enough, some consultants choose to switch to a non-client-facing role, such as building intellectual property or being in a back-office role, such as recruiting or training. I hope I was able to give you insight into what it's like to work at a consulting firm, especially if you're wondering if the work-life balance is possible. And since you made it to the end of the video, I'm going to share with you some creative ways that McKinsey, Bain, and BCG have allowed their consultants to have more work-life balance. Each of the MBB firms understands that consultants are people too, and you can't just expect them to run long distances at fast pace forever, and that there needs to be periods of rest. Examples of these programs include externship opportunities, where consultants can extern for a few months at a different company or even a nonprofit. This is mainly for junior roles. For example, if you want to take 6 months to work at the Gates Foundation, you can. For some reason, the Gates Foundation is actually pretty popular with getting externs. You can do a rotation in a practice area. That is, helping teams that serve a particular industry or function. For example, you might elect to work in the AI practice area and help develop firm industry reports on AI technology. Or you might do a rotation in an internal operational role, such as staffing, training, or professional development. This would give you a chance to see if you prefer a non-client facing role at the firm later on. Still, you might do a rotation in a different office so you can live in a different city or country. You could also apply for reduced hours, such as you're only working 50% of the week for the firm and the other 50% is your time. I know 2 consultants who did this, and they spent 50% working with the firm and the other 50% of the time they were directing their own movies. You can also take unpaid leave for periods of couple months at a time where you can pursue what it is that's been on your mind, such as a trip or a sporting event that you've been preparing for. So for example, the consultants I mentioned who were directing movies, when their film would go to festivals and so forth, they would take unpaid leave completely. Or depending on your situation, you might even be able to take leave but get it paid for at a percentage of your current salary. This can go as high as 80% of your current salary, depending on the office and the firm policy. The MBB firms do want you to have work-life balance and do want you to have a sustained career in consulting. So as a result, they're going to do at least what's reasonable within a client services space to make sure that you have a great experience. So if you're worried that you're going to be working 60+ hour weeks every single week, you don't have to be. So there you have it. Now you have a view of what work-life balance is like while working in consulting. Now, after learning about the work-life balance you can expect in consulting, you still want to become a management consultant. I want to help you get there. My team and I have helped over 600 people start their careers at firms like McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. And we want you to be our next success story. If you click the link below, you can book a free 30-minute strategy session with my team. We're gonna walk you through step-by-step how you can get an offer at your dream consulting firm. But you don't take my word for it. Hear from Catherine about what it was like to work with us.